Wow. So this is like more than I expected, especially with the snow and everything. So thank you all for being here. I appreciate that you came out, and I hope you get something out of this. I'm Sunday Dutro. You might recognize my name from the Ledger, where I have a monthly column called What You're Reading. In addition to the Ledger, I have a couple pieces coming out in Panorama, which is from the UK, and Bear Paw Arts Journal, which is brand new here in Montana. This will be their inaugural issue, the fall issue. And I was thinking, if you guys are up for it, we will do a quick 5-minute writing prompt. So writing prompts for me are a great way to just get writing and loosen up and relax and learn to trust myself, because I think a lot of writing is learning to trust yourself. So the best way to do a writing prompt is to not edit, not stop, just keep going. Even if you're writing, I don't know what I'm writing. You're not required to use the actual words in the prompt. A lot of times where people go from a writing prompt is completely different, and it's fascinating. And I'm not gonna make you guys share. Without further ado, anger is one of my favorite creative resources. And this is Austin Kleon from Steal Like an Artist, which is an actual amazing book. It's very quick. So anger is one of my favorite creative resources. Go. All right, folks, that was 5. So one of the other really great things about this is that you think, oh, I can't do anything in 5 minutes, I can't go anywhere. A lot of times when you are forced to stop at 5, you realize that you want to keep going and you wish you had more time to keep going. 5 minutes is also usually enough time to get you close to 100 words, which is considered a flash piece. Lots of places, journals and things take flash pieces and will publish them. Defining what it is that you want to write is sometimes harder than you would think. I started out doing short stories thinking that's safe, right? I'll put some time into a short story, and if it's horrible, throw it away. No big deal. I didn't waste my entire life on a short story. I wasted a few hours, right? A few days. I wrote one short story that was from just writing without stopping in the morning, because that's my practice. And it started out literally about a fly buzzing around, and it's the dead of winter. And I'm like, why? How is this possible that there's a fly alive right now? This is ridiculous. And that led to, how can the fly be alive when the baby isn't? And that's what started this whole story about a woman who miscarries, and she had this horrible time, and a poor her, right? And when I read that to a writing group, they all said, if this is true, it needs to be memoir, and it needs to be an actual book, not just a story. And making it a book wasn't safe, which is why I didn't. But now it is a book, or will hopefully be a book. It is in book form now. But the point is that if you start doing whatever your practice is and really giving it the time that it needs, even if it's just 5 minutes, you have no idea where that's going to go, what it could lead to. So, give yourself the time, honor yourself in your craft and what it is that you want to do. If you don't know what you want to do, try everything, right? So there's all kinds of different writing, and you've got to know what it is that you're doing and why. Because when I was growing up, people said, oh, you're an artist because you have to be. You're a writer because you have to write. And that's true. It's 100% true. But when people ask you why you write, if you say, because I have to, nobody likes that answer, even if it's the truth, even if it's the distilled truth. You write because you have to. So figure out why you want to write. It'll make it a lot easier to keep going when rejections come in, if you decide to start submitting, because the rejections will come in. But first you have to have a writing practice. And everybody's is going to look different, right? So for me, my kids are asleep, my husband is asleep, the dogs don't need me at 4:30 in the morning. And that's when I write. So I write for as long as I possibly can until the chaos begins. But I can type on a computer in the dark, right? Or I can go sit quietly with a candle, which a lot of people do. It's very surprising. A candle in the dark, writing longhand, is very popular. I can't do it, I can't see, but it's very popular. So a great writing practice, if you don't have one right now and you're trying to cultivate one, is to give yourself a word count goal. 500 words, 1,000 words. But Carolyn C. said that if you write 1,000 words a day, you're on your way. 1,000 words a day is a book in a month or something ridiculous. It's insane if you stop and do the math. So create a goal for yourself and create a time that you're going to write. And if that's hard for you, try to piggyback a time that you write on something that you already do that's successful, right? Like every day I walk the dogs in the morning without fail. It doesn't matter what's going on outside, I walk the dog. Great, walk the dog, and when you're done, 5 minutes, you're going to write. That's your goal. Chris Latre, who I mentioned earlier, who's amazing, he was just named Montana Poet Laureate. He's a poet by nature, but he wasn't finding any time to do it. And so he said, I'm going to write 1 sentence a day. That's the bare minimum that I'm going to let myself get away with. And to hold myself accountable, I'm going to send those sentences at the end of every month to everybody on my Substack. So I have to do it, right? I can't get away with not doing it. You would be amazed at how much can be conveyed in a single sentence. And these are not run-on sentences like I tend to write and speak in. These are sometimes very concise, very short sentences, and they're beautiful. And if you need a little inspiration, Chris Latre on Substack, it's free, and once a month you would get his little newsletter with his sentences, and they tell a phenomenal story, a beautiful story. So choose whatever it is that you're gonna do, and then just do it, even if it seems like it's not enough, because something is always better than nothing, and you cannot edit a blank page, which we've all heard 1,000 times. So if you are at least writing 1 sentence a day, or 500 words a day, or whatever you're doing, you're going to have something to work with when you do have the time. Another thing like that I've been doing is a 100 rejections challenge, because apparently in the standard in the industry is that you will get 10 rejections for every 1 acceptance. And so far that's holding up. So my goal is 100 rejections a year. Minimum, I want 100 rejections a year. That means I got 10 things published, in theory, right? So the only bad thing that I've heard about that is people who keep submitting the same thing that's been rejected 100 times already. If that one thing has been rejected 100 times, it's time to sit with it, right? Like, it's time to figure out why. What's missing? Do I think it's great, but it's really not great? Did I think it was great at the time, and now I read it and I see where things are missing? Like, give yourself some grace, because even Stephen King had Carrie rejected how many millions of times, and it's a fabulous book. Like, I'm not even a horror person, and that's a great book. So remember that where you're at with something might not be where your reader is at with something. And so just because one person rejects it doesn't mean that somebody else will. And Natalie Goldberg, she started out writing poetry, and it wasn't going anywhere. She was submitting and getting rejections left, right, and center. And so then she started writing essays, and they were just off the hook, right? Everybody wanted them. She was getting published all over the place. Now she's got all these books. Writing Down the Bones is considered one of the books you have to read on writing, like Stephen King's On Writing. But so she then, as an adult, was listening to the radio, and Garrison Keillor was reading one of her poems from way back when, and she heard it. She's listening to this poem that she wrote over 20 years before, and she's like, I knew that was a good poem, but it had been rejected over and over, right? So sometimes you just gotta take the rejections for what they are, as awful as they are, and just keep going. So finding your people will help, and it's harder than you would think. I believe that everybody is a writer, but not everybody is a good reader or a good critiquer. So I like to send things to my mommy, because she tells me how amazing it is. And then I'm ready for real feedback, right? Like, once I know how wonderful it is, then I can handle people telling me, wow, this is garbage here and here and here, or I have no idea what you're talking about, or how did you get from here to there, or whatever, right? But so find your people, find the people who love what you write no matter what it is, and find the people who will tell you the truth, like, hey, I love this and I am in until right here, and then you lost me, and I didn't, if I wasn't reading it for you, I wouldn't have kept reading it, right? So you need the balance. Once you just start telling people that you are a writer, that you claim it, but you have to say who you are, right, to meet the people who are also trying to say who they are. But yeah, they're there. There's Missoula Writing Collaborative for people your age. They run a summer camp, and I don't remember exactly how long it is, but that's a phenomenal resource. They also do an adult workshop, Missoula Writing Collaborative, and they're close, considering where we are, right? They're close. There's lots and lots of workshops that you can take too if you are just interested in being held accountable. You know, like I want to write, but because I'm not writing for anybody else, I don't write. So workshops you have to have something to turn in each time, and there are tons of them online now, ever since COVID. So the blessing and the curse, right? So kind of have an idea of what it is that you're looking for if you are going to pick a retreat to go to or a workshop to join. When you are finally ready to submit, you've got this piece that went through your mom who told you it was amazing, and then went through a real editor who told you here's what you need to do to clean it up, and now you're like, I feel good about this, I'm going to submit it. There are tons and tons of options. Submittable is probably the biggest. Everybody uses Submittable. Some people also or instead use Duotrope. I don't have any experience with Duotrope. These are both online. They're free to sign up for. I have found that a lot of places that I would normally want to submit to charge a reading fee to help them cover their fees, because it's the people putting out the call that are paying Submittable to use it. So the writers get to use Submittable for free, which is amazing, right? Until you have to start paying submission fees. I personally don't submit to anything that requires a fee, not because I'm high and lofty, but because I'm broke, but also because I don't think it's fair to charge people to submit. Not everybody can afford to submit, right? Especially when you're first starting out, or when you realize that 10 rejections for 1 acceptance, if it's $3 every time, that just cost you $30 for your acceptance, right? And you're not getting paid. So some places that you submit to do pay. They're a lot harder to get into, especially when you're starting. So like the Kenyon Review, right? Someday you'll find my work in the Kenyon Review, and that is a dream. But it's a big dream. People can write and submit to Kenyon for 10 years before they'll get their first acceptance. So decide if you're gonna create a little piggy bank that this is my submission money, and when I get $3 I can submit to one of these that charges. Or if you're just gonna say, no, forget it, I'm only gonna submit to places that don't charge until enough people see me and come to me and want my stuff. Because that can happen too. It hasn't happened to me yet, but I've heard that it can happen. What else? Local resources. You've got the Ledger, you've got the Clark Fork Valley Press. There are newspapers in Missoula as well. Don't ever forget that we have a lot of local places you can publish. A lot of people will read their favorite authors and find out where they've been published before too. So if you have somebody that you write or you write similar to, that's a great place to start. Go and see, have they written any short stories and where were they published? A lot of books in the very back will also tell you, thank you to the Kenyon Review who first published chapter 5, right, as a short story. So if you're not, and Submittable will overload you with your options, but if you're not finding any options you like, definitely go look to the people you write and not necessarily your heroes, right? I love Elizabeth Strout. I think she's an amazing, phenomenal writer. I don't write like Elizabeth Strout, so I wouldn't go look and see where she's been published before, because that doesn't help me. It's highly unlikely that I would be a good fit for anywhere that she's been published, right? So,
do you save all your rejections?
I do. So I have a spreadsheet, and I can even pull it up if anybody actually cares enough to see it. So my process for submitting is, if I've written it and it's passed my editing test and I'm ready to submit it, I send it out. The minute it comes back with a rejection, sadly, I look at it again, double check, does it still say what I want it to say? Is it still I think this would stand up in 20 years if I heard it read to me on the radio? Okay, then I submit it again, same day. I don't wait. I don't say, I'll get to it later this week, because I won't. I know I won't. So same day is my rule for myself. It has to go back out to somebody else. Who else would it be a fit for? And that's where a place like Submittable or Duotrope comes in super handy, because you just go in and you go, okay, what's coming up right now for submissions? And then you scroll through, you can filter even. You can say, well, this is a Flash piece, so I only show me places that are taking Flash right now. And then, and only show me places that are no fee. And then you pick where you're going to send it. And even that is not an easy process like it sounds, because you've got to go check and see. Sometimes these places have a theme for that month. So even though they're taking pieces right now, if your piece doesn't match the theme, you're gonna get a rejection. So why would you submit it, right? So things like that. So yeah, so I track everything, and I track the rejections so that I can not only keep myself accountable, but I've been telling people that I'm doing this 100 rejections challenge. So once a month, I create my little video of here's how many rejections I've had, here's how many acceptances I've had, and it's like Chris Lattre's one sentence thing, right? He's keeping himself accountable with his newsletter every month. So
How many pieces, like, are you, like, do you have 50 that you're trying to submit at any given time, or?
don't know. I'm
Or is it
afraid
like
to like
4?
pull it up right now. Oh no, it's a lot. It's a
Okay.
lot. It's somewhere between like 30 and 50.
Oh.
So I always, and they're always out there. And that's the other thing is like a lot of times, so you submit in September when everything opens, but you don't hear back from them until December when they're done reading everything. So you can't just have one piece or you're never going to get 100 rejections in a year, if that's even your goal. I don't know, but that was my goal. So I'm like, I have to have enough pieces out there constantly churning to get some acceptances, to get some rejections. And that was actually something, it was either, this is terrible, but it was either Virginia Woolf or Sylvia Plath that did that. That was like, the minute the rejection comes in, it gets turned right back around and sent out again. And I was like, that's a good goal. That's a good, okay, that's something I can do that'll keep me accountable to myself. And
What kind of subject matter do you deal with?
well, so my memoir is about
I gather
miscarriage.
a large variety of subjects.
Yeah. So
Is this fiction, nonfiction?
yeah, so my memoir is nonfiction about miscarriage, and then I do have some short stories because that's where I started. I was like, I'm just going to do short stories because they're safe. So I do still have some of those that I'm sending out. I have yet to have a short story picked up, so none of them have been published yet or accepted for publishing. So that might tell me everything I need to know about my short stories versus everything else. Right now, what has been picked up, what's coming out in Bear Paw and Panorama are flash pieces, which are those 100-word limits. And not everybody does a 100-word limit on a flash either. So you need to also look and see what they say. So for both of these, actually, they wanted a higher word count. They wanted 150 words or something, which it's amazing when you take something that's already shortened and sweet and punchy like a poem where it kind of hits and you have to expand it. Oh, that's kind of harder to do.
What's the biggest lesson you've learned, like, and now that you've started writing your memoir, like, what have you learned in that process?
That you have to trust yourself as the writer, because you're going to get feedback that you don't necessarily agree with. So you have to know where you're going to put your line of, no, I'm not changing that. That is the way it needs to be. And where you need to trust your reader and say, yeah, they're right. This doesn't belong here. There are a lot of authors who will have like their death files, their babies, their darlings off the cutting room floor, right? So anything you delete before you delete it, if you copy and paste it into a separate file. Another thing that I've learned is that you should always save a new version of whatever you're working on when you're going through major edits. Not small edits. Small edits don't usually matter, but when something is going from, like, I think that this is as done as I can get it to be, and now I have all these edits from all these people and I'm rewriting it, save a new version first so that you have that old one. What else? Check out Submittable, check out Missoula Writing Collaborative if you're interested in finding workshops or getting published. And then start a list of places you want to be published, even if they're pipe dream places. The Atlantic, the New Yorker, the New York Times, right? Just start a list of all the places. If you read something amazing somewhere, where did you read it? And put it on your list, right? Because if you're reading stuff there, other people are too, right? So start your list. There are a lot of places that aren't around the next year. So the list can never be too long, right? Unfortunately. The other thing is that if you are serious about publishing or trying to get published, then definitely keep track of your pieces and where you're sending them and when they come back. And if the rejection says anything more than the form rejection, which is, this does not suit our needs at this time, or something essentially like that, that's like, yeah, I call it the first draft. So if you get anything other than a first draft email, if you get something that actually says, you know, some of the words we heard were beautiful or lovely or whatever, save that bit of information, save the name and email of who told you that, so that when you resubmit to them with something else or with an edited version of that, you can say, you called this piece lovely, right? Or on December whatever, you called this piece lovely, and I've rewritten it and I'd like your input or whatever, right? So go to the same people, use their exact same words. It's all very helpful, but you got to track it all, which is a little bit of time for potentially huge payoff, right? Another thing to keep in mind, even though it is the New York Times, they do modern love pieces that are flash pieces, 100 words tops. They have to be about love. It does not have to be lovey-dovey love. It can be any kind of love. It can be love for country, right? The only thing they don't want is dog stories. They say, do not send me dog stories. They say it very specifically in there. I don't want to hear about your dog. Everybody has a great dog. If your dog died, I don't want to hear about it. So, but they are a wonderful resource. They also, it's called Tiny Modern Love on the 100 words part, Tiny Modern Love. And they also want you to send a photo. So it doesn't have to be like, if you were writing about a dead spouse or something, it doesn't have to be a photo of you and your spouse. It can be a photo of you and the thing that you were writing about in the story about the spouse, right? So like you and the ornament, or just a picture of the ornament or whatever. So they're very lenient on it, but they do want a picture with your 100 words. And they take forever to get back to you. Like, I think it's 6 months is their time frame. So that's the other thing to keep in mind, is that when you are submitting, most places are okay with simultaneous submissions. So that means I have one piece, I have sent that one piece to 50 places, and now I'm just waiting for all 50 to want it, right? Because the first one that tells me they want it gets it, because that's the way it works, and then you've got to go tell the other 49, oh, I can't, I have to bring this one back, you can't have it, it's already being published. That to me is a lot of work and a lot of frustration, like on my part, if I was putting together a newsletter and I was constantly, or a magazine, and I was constantly hearing, oh, I have to withdraw my submission, that would just drive me nuts. So I don't do that, but lots of people do. And so you'll see it right there in the requirements, simultaneous submissions allowed, or simultaneous submissions not allowed. So make sure you're paying attention to that as well. For me, I don't simultaneously submit. It's just way too much stress, too much anxiety. So I send one piece to one place and wait to be told, we don't want it, or better yet, we do want it. And that first acceptance is like phenomenal. It doesn't matter if it's a little tiny place that nobody's ever heard about. It's because you get enough rejections. You get so many, even the form letter ones that now I just kind of ignore. They're like water off a duck's back, right? Like, this doesn't meet our needs. Yeah, well, neither do you, right? So on to the next one, right? But then when you get like these really, I've gotten some rejection letters that are like the sweetest Dear John ever, where like I want to write back and be like, can we be in a relationship just so that you'll break up with me again? Because that was so awesome. You made me feel so good. So there are definitely like good rejections out there too. I didn't believe it at first, and now I do. Montana Arts Council, they are big too. They put out a free paper, like physical newsletter. I think it's quarterly. And they are a great place to find out what's going on in the art community, and not just visual arts either. And they have a program called the Montana Entrepreneur Program that if you are looking to get into the business of writing, are wanting to keep in touch, I would love it. I love hearing from other writers all the time, especially people getting started. Your frustrations will be great and your victories few in the beginning. And so it's really nice sometimes to have somebody that you can send off the, can you believe this rejection letter, kind of an email, and have somebody be like, yeah, that was harsh. So now what are you gonna do? Like, how are you gonna channel that? Where are you gonna go next? What are you gonna do next? Okay, so I have lots of different tabs. I'm also, this is probably not what everybody does. This is just what I do. Because I'm very, like, yeah, I get overwhelmed easily. I get anxiety easily. So I keep track of all the journals that I'm interested in, not interested in too, because I don't want to keep wasting my time looking at the exact same journal 5,000 times on Submittable and going, oh yeah, I don't want to submit there, and here's why. So a lot of places I won't submit to because they charge a fee, because their "we'll get back to you" is in like a year and a half or whatever. It's just too long. I don't want to be kept waiting that long. I highlight in yellow either things that are coming up or things that I want to make sure I don't miss next time they come up. So that's some of that. I've got a list of reprint journals. These are places that you've already been published somewhere, and now you have this piece. It's been 30 days and you own the rights again, because that's generally how it works, but you got to check every place you're published. They might not have that same 30-day limit. Sometimes it's a different limit. But at some point, the rights hopefully revert back to you, and then you can do whatever you want with that piece, like publish it in a book of short stories. You usually are required to say, where it was originally published. But anyhow, there are some journals that will publish things that have already been published. They are few and far between. I don't know that they're necessarily fabulous literary works of art that people would read, but it's just good to know, right? If you're trying to get a bunch of publishings under your belt, nobody needs to know that, this little hole-in-the-wall journal republished something that was already published. So here are my current submissions that are out. I keep track of where I sent it, what kind of piece it is, the name of it, the date I submitted it, the date I'm expecting a response back. Twinbird Review got back to me the first time I sent something right away, and they were one of the love letter rejections. So they are like at the top of my list for places to send stuff to. But now, as you can see, I submitted something on 7:30, and as of 10:22, when I was supposed to hear back, I haven't heard back yet. And I haven't done anything about it because I had other things on my plate this week. But normally, I would be like, oh, 10:22, that came and went. I'm going to send an email. I'm going to follow up. Because sometimes what happens is, yeah, they got it, and it's somewhere, but it got lost, right? It's not that you've been rejected. They might even be being like, no, we're seriously considering it, and it's on so-and-so's desk now, or whatever. So I always follow up before I go, okay, now I need to resubmit that somewhere else. Some people I know don't do that. They just are like, oh, well, it's past the deadline. I'm going to go submit it somewhere else now. And to me, it takes so much time to find a place to submit it and send it that, like, why would you shoot yourself in the foot when somebody might be considering it, right? I track my rejections. 22 so far. Not bad. Except that when you look at my acceptances, I think there's 4. So, but yeah, so I track, and then if they said anything wonderful, I keep track of it. I never delete the emails either. I keep them in a folder, a submissions email folder, so that I can go back and if I need any more detail, or if I need to know who said what, I can go find it. But things like honor to consider for future calls, like, oh yes, I'm going to track that because that's somewhere I want to submit to again. Nobody tells you they are honored to consider your work. Like, that's amazing feedback. It's my little acceptances. Aww, hey. Someday it's going to take up more than one screen. Someday.
You've got a tremendous variance of the subject matter and the magazine styles and types.
Yeah.
Do you hunt these down and stalk them? You get a copy of the magazine, see what they're looking for, write something appropriate?
I do it all online. You can see, like, your pieces that are submitted right now, like something that's been received, it's in progress, it's been declined, whatever it is. You can filter all up in this if you like. I don't need to see the ones that have been declined. I don't need that kind of negativity today. Up here under Discover is going to be your favorite place in the world because it tells you what's going on. Who has open calls right now? So my favorite thing to do is come to Discover and immediately click on no fee. Because I'm not going to submit.
Publications that are looking for articles to publish.
Yeah. Now, Submittable doesn't go through and say, like, this one is irreputable, you don't want to submit there. They don't do that. It's open calls, baby. If somebody's going to pay to have their open call on here, Submittable's going to say, yes, please, and thank you, I'll take your money. So it's up to you to say, I don't really want my work there. I've looked at that journal and it's not for me, which is why that spreadsheet that I showed you earlier had some things grayed out. Sometimes it's that I went and looked at it and I'm like, I don't like their setup. When I go online and look at it, I can't tell who wrote what. I can't easily find something by anybody. And that doesn't work for me, because if I'm going to actually get published, I want people to find it. Like I want it to be seen. So that's up to you if you care like where your stuff goes. So I immediately filter by no fee, and then sometimes I will also filter even further, either with the search or with the tag. The tags are phenomenal because you can go here and you can say Flash. I have a Flash piece. Who's taking Flash right now with no fee? The only thing to keep in mind is that sometimes the people who do the call don't fill it out correctly. So like big whoopee deal, you'll see that I have 2 drafts there. That's because I mistakenly opened it up thinking it was a no fee to submit, and it's not a no fee. Sometimes that happens, but not very often. But this also will have workshops on it. You can filter for workshops. You can filter for things like, bless you, like the Missoula Art Museum, I can't remember which one, but there's an art museum in Missoula that right now has a call out for artwork. They want artwork for their auction or something that they're doing. But so you can find all kinds of stuff on Submittable. It's incredible what you can find if you start digging around. Remember though that this is not your first priority of the day. The first priority of the day is your 1 sentence or your 500 words or your 1,000 words, right? So, but yeah, you can spend a lot of time on Submittable. So saved, you can also save things. So if I found something that I liked and I'm like, ooh, I am definitely going to go back and submit to that when I have a piece either get rejected or I have a new piece that I want to send out. I'm going to come back here and look at these ones that I've already looked at, and I already know that they're no fee and that they already have a good website and they already do all the things I like. So you can save their calls and see them, they automatically put them in deadline order for you, which is very nice. A lot of places will be no fee for X amount of time, and then once they hit a certain number of submissions, then they start charging a fee. So just every time you go in here to do something, you want to just double check that it's still no fee. You won't pay anything until you click to submit anyhow, so you're not going to accidentally get charged. It can't happen. A lot of places have a cap on how many submissions they'll accept. So they open calls September 15th, and they're open all the way up until May 31st, or until they hit their cap, whichever comes first. If it's a place like the Kenyon Review or someplace that's like, lofty, they hit that cap fast. So you don't want to be thinking, oh, I'll get around to this in April, because it's not going to be an open call anymore. It'll be closed. They'll hit that cap. Some places hit their cap in 2 days. So if it's some place that you really like, that's again where you have your spreadsheet of tracking the places you like and when they open submissions, because then they open submissions September 15th, I'm going to be in there. September 15th at 4:30 in the morning when I get up to do my writing, I'm actually going to submit first so that I get in before the call closes, and then I'm going to write, or whatever your process is. Anything else? Have I completely bored and overwhelmed you all at the same time? Because if so, I've done my job. Lots of writing groups will edit each other, and that's a great place to start if you've never had any edits at all, is get together with other people who are writers and do edits. And you'll also learn whether or not these are your editors. I was very lucky. I had an amazing woman put me in touch with another amazing woman who is a phenomenal editor. She was a school teacher, or is a school teacher, but she also used to edit professionally for a newspaper, I believe, or a magazine. And she was unreal. She gave me the mom, you're amazing and everything is perfect, and also but right here none of this made sense, or right here you lost me, or you're still in the past but now you're back in the future but I'm still in the past, so you got to bring me back, right? The things that really do help your story become a story and not just a journal entry.
What about the cost for those services? Are they reasonable?
So if you go on Fiverr, which I do not recommend, but you can find an editor for $100, $300, $500, $1,000. They'll tell you what they edit and what they charge, and it's a done deal. But you're getting what you pay for, always.
Why don't you like them?
Because you're getting what you pay for always, and I don't have a lot of money to pay an editor. So usually a really good edit is going to cost you a minimum of $1,000, but it also depends on what they're editing. Is it a kid's book? You can probably get away with a lot less money on an editor because you've got something like 35 words usually. I mean, not 35, but it's capped, right? How many words? And that's the other thing, is you can always Google if you're like, what's the average memoir? What's the average kid's book? What's the average? And they'll tell you how many words. So if you're like, am I in my genre? Because sometimes you're not. And if you are trying to get published by a professional publisher, they will look at things like that. Like if you say you have a kid's book, but you also say it's 5,000 words, they're not even going to bother reading it because you clearly don't have a kid's book, and you don't know that you don't have a kid's book, and they don't want to work with you. So, like, know your genre. There's also different kinds of editing. There's line editing, which is going to be the most expensive, and that's where they are reading every single line and giving you detailed feedback all the way through. It's going to be grammar, it's going to be style, it's going to be everything. It's a full edit. Then there's like a more general edit where they just tell you, like, I couldn't follow your story here, and then I picked it up again here, or whatever, which is really useful feedback, but maybe not for $1,000 or $10,000 or whatever, right? So editing can be very expensive depending on what you want, and that's another thing where if you sell it to a publisher, they take those costs. They get you an editor. You work with their editor, but you're not paying their editor. So I highly recommend, if you are trying to publish, that you do edit it the best you can with the resources available to you before you give it to the publisher, but you're gonna have to edit it again. You're like, nobody has ever written anything that was less than 7 drafts ever, full drafts. And that's why they say, write the book you love, because you're gonna read it over and over and over. That's why Stephen King in his book On Writing says, write it and then put it in a drawer and don't look at it for a year, I think is what he says. And most people don't have that kind of time. But like, put it away and don't look at it for a while, because you're going to be so sick of it, and you're not going to be catching anything anymore either, because you know it in and out. You've been immersed in it for however long it took you to write it, and so now you don't even see things that are clear as day, right? But you pull it out in a month or 2 months or 6 months or whatever you can afford to wait, however long you can hold yourself off, and suddenly you're reading it with brand new eyes. You're like, wow, this doesn't hit the way I remember it hitting. So thank you all for coming, especially in snow and everything. And if you guys do have any questions, please, you can email me. I'm really good at email. I'm not so good at phone calls, which is why I don't put my phone number on anything.